Between the hills, the stars, the sky, the river so clear, river so clear.
Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Scott Taylor, The Blessings of Trust. We gather today to receive the blessings of trust. May the relationships in this room remind us we do not have to depend only on ourselves. May the quiet we share help us to hear and renew our faith in that still, small voice inside. May the music sung inspire us to hold tight to the restorative rhythms of the world. May the words offered remind us that we too have a voice, one that must be trusted and shared. With our hearts open, let us begin. This morning we have a very special program. Larry McDonough and Carol Bergquist are joining us. They're visiting from St. Paul. Larry is an award-winning jazz composer, pianist, singer, and teacher, as well as a nonprofit lawyer and law professor. Flutist Carol Bergquist has been active as a performer, soloist, and teacher in the Twin Cities for over 45 years. And they join us today with a special musical program as Larry and Carol perform these pieces written with children with special needs, including their daughter Rosie. Larry also will discuss the history of laws that support people with special needs, available resources, and the need to support those resources in times when they're under threat. So please welcome Larry and Carol.
Well, thanks a lot. It's nice to be here. I haven't been here before, but we've been to Unitarian congregations around the country. Mostly play in Minnesota, but sometimes in Paris and sometimes on the East Coast. So say a little bit about us. So you might be able to pronounce my last name because I'm the brother of Dr. Steve McDonough. Some of you may know of Steve. And so we're actually staying out at his house. So he's my older brother. I'm the baby boy in the family. And my wife, Carol Bergquist, over here, she's the daughter of Dewey and Tessie Bergquist. For those of you in my generation, you might remember Dewey as being the longtime weatherman on WDAY. And Tessie sang on WDAY in the 1940s in a women's group called the Gal Friends. That was kind of a lot like the Andrews Sisters. And we're also visiting Carol's aunt, Lois Swenson. So she was married to Wayne Swenson, also a prominent doctor in town, and he passed away this last year. So I've been involved with the special needs community for a long time. We have a daughter, Rosie, who's 31 now, and so parenting her with special needs was, something I was not prepared to do, but it was something that we learned how to do. But also in my advocacy work, I've worked in the legal aid community for a long time, and certainly had a lot of clients with special needs. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of the history of how society has dealt with people with special needs. I like to talk about special abilities too, because I'd say Rosie is the special needs kid of ours, and then we have two more typical kids, and Rosie is the most musical of the three. So she has some abilities that her older sisters don't have. So I got involved with this project about 20 some years ago, where another parent of special needs children had developed a computer program where the kids would touch on a touch screen. Now keep in mind, this is 25 years ago, so the computer's a little bit different. We weren't using cards, but still. So it was a very basic touch screen with, I think, 8 colors on it. And the kids could touch colors, and those would be assigned to notes. And then the program would remember the notes. And the kids might have been intentional, or they might have been random. I actually think Rosie was kind of random on hers. Rosie will always be like a preschooler in an adult's body. That's just how she travels the world. What makes her kind of this really funny, cool knucklehead. But she's very vulnerable. I mean, she would get in a car with any of you. And so she doesn't have good sense of boundaries and safeties and things like that. And so my job was to take these notes, and sometimes they were quite minimal, and expand them into songs. And what was really fun about the project is it kind of pushed me to write songs differently than I would have otherwise. So they were influencing me rather than me just helping them. So the first piece I'll do is a piece called Solitude. And the evolution of that piece is really kind of cool. There were 3 kids, Ellie, Jack, and Christian, who wrote small snippets of melody. And I'll play you that melody, and then I'll play you the song, and then one of my collaborators, a sax player and a poet, wrote some lyrics to it, and we titled it Solitude. So here's the notes that I was given by the 3 kids. So it's... So I needed to spend a little time with this because it wasn't a melody that I would have written. What I decided to do is to expand out the notes so that it would move slower, and I would assign chords to different notes. So I'll play it instrumentally, and then I'll sing the lyrics. Sun
smooth. Nights my solitude. Dogs of winter, cold as feather snow, I feel trees around me breathe. Silence of their leaves. Like a camera's image on a screen, I have seen skyscapes perfect gray, worlds that gone away.
We join Universalist Unitarians all over the world in lighting our chalice. Andrea, would you come forward and light our chalice this morning? Our chalice is a symbol of the spark of life in each of us. And if you're on Zoom and wish to join us to light your candle as well, please turn on your video and do so. We are in good company. Our chalice lighting words are from the Reverend Julie Ann Lepp. We light this chalice with hope, a sturdy flame we nurture in these difficult times. We light this chalice with the heart of compassion for a nation divided by politics and strife. We light this chalice knowing that it will take all of us to repair this world we live in. May we find rest, compassion, and the hope we need to nurture ourselves and each other. May this sturdy light remind us of the people we can be and the difference we can make in the world together.
I put together a little outline of kind of the history of how people with special needs have kind of traveled the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that outline. It appears from archaeological work that early societies, prehistoric societies, treated people with special needs, in my view, appropriately, so that if someone needed help doing things, that they would get help doing those things, that the family circles stayed relatively small. And it was really more starting in the Middle Ages, where there seemed to be a more dismissive look of people with special needs. Some thought that if you were different, it was caused by satanic issues, demons, things like that. That disability started to become a concept where there was a sense of that there's normal people out there, and then there are other people, and those other people are maybe have less worth or they're less worthy. And it really kind of continued on into kind of the capitalist era, where the focus was really on value, was what you could contribute in terms of work. So if you can work in the coal mines, great. But if you can't work in the coal mines, then you're a lesser member of society. I'll talk on the next break about how things really started to change. Unfortunately, way too late by my perspective. It was really more in the 60s and the 70s where you start to see a different view of people with special needs and disabilities. So the next piece I'm going to play is a piece called Funkability. It may not sound as funky as it is on the recording because I don't have a whole band with me. And so I'll do the best I can with it. Part of what's been fun writing these pieces is that some of them just needed to be in time signatures other than 4/4 time. For those of you that are musical, you know what that means. For those of you that aren't, if you're going to dance the Lindy to a tune, believe me, it's in 4/4 time. 4/4 is very symmetrical. It's pretty easy to follow. Sometimes we hear pieces in 3/4. Those would be waltzes. Tunes in 5, 7, 9, 11, 13 don't happen too often in American music, but the last piece I played was in 7, and this one's also in 7, and I think the next one I'm doing is in 5. So these tunes kind of propelled different structures. So the next piece I'm going to do is called Funkability, and the melodies were from a couple of kids, Lucas and Jack. I'll play their melodies, and then I'll play what I came up with. Once again, I struggled with this a little bit. And I think what I figured out from the last piece is sometimes I just needed to extend the melodies out so that some of the relationships wouldn't sound as avant-garde. So here it is. One of the things I like probably most about Unitarian congregations, besides the community, is the joys and concerns. And it's nice that it's not all happy stuff, that it's tough stuff, that it's the reality of our lives. And so, thanks. I know that's hard to share that stuff. When you're talking about the activism, you know, Unitarians have such a long history of that. I played at a Unitarian church in Philadelphia many years ago, and it housed people that came up on the Underground Railroad, and so there's a lot of really great activist history there. And what really happened in the 1970s for people with special needs is this kind of activism. You know, I've taught in law schools, and when I went to law school, it was easy to think that the law is a static thing because that's kind of how it was taught, and it's not static. It's not elements of physics, right? It's all developed by people, which means it can change. And just because something was developed by someone, 1,000 years ago doesn't mean that that needs to be the concept right now. And the way those things change is by organizing. So that's really what was happening in the 1960s and 70s. I mean, when you go back to the 1930s and 40s, President Roosevelt hid his disability. Whenever he was out in public, he was not in a wheelchair because he thought that people would view him as being less able, less strong. And those concepts really started to change in the 60s and 70s. And it's that activism that led to both changes in language and changes in law. So in the outline here, I have some of the words that people have used over the years, handicap, disabled, retard, retardation, special needs, special abilities. And so if you're talking to someone who has a special need, and if you really need to have a title, which you really don't, but if you need to describe that person in some way that has something to do with their need or disability, people differ on how they want to be titled. Some like kind of the person first, like a person with disability or spina bifida or whatever. Others want the adjective first, like disabled, special needs person, something like that. But also, do we really need categories talking about people? I'm a mutt. I'm Irish, British, Scottish, German. Be a little bit hard to hyphenate all that. But do we really need to put all those in front of me as an American? Because of my last name, people just assume I'm Irish American, and I guess it's okay. So think about whether you really need to use those terms or not. Now, sometimes it's necessary, if you're talking to a legislative body and we say we need to do something to help this class of individuals. Well, then maybe it makes sense to say, okay, this is that class of individuals. And then I just wanted to say a little bit about some of the laws that came out of the 70s. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was one of the first major laws that impacted people with special needs that were dealing with entities that were receiving federal funds. So for instance, a person with a special need who needed reasonable accommodation from their landlord-tenant law is mostly what I know. It was that law that required the landlord to do something extra to allow that person with a special need to live independently. We also have the Individual Disabilities Education Act. Some of you may have heard of IEPs. Those are individual education plans. Those are the plans that have school systems adjusting a little bit so that kids with special needs can be independent through the school system. So Rosie had an IEP. One of my very first cases as a legal aid lawyer was going to a small town and just saying, the law requires you to test this kid orally. And no one had ever asked him to do it. The parents asked him to do it, and they said, well, no, we don't do that. Well, just we don't do that doesn't mean the law doesn't require you to do that. And so I felt very heady about that. I got them to do it. But then as I was driving back to my small town from that small town, I was thinking, it shouldn't have needed this young legal aid lawyer to come in and say that. They could have just listened to the parents and done it. So I started feeling good about myself, and then I was starting to feel crabby, not about myself, but about the fact that I needed to say the words that the parents had said. They just came out of the lawyer's mouth instead of the parent's mouth. And there are other laws like the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in North Dakota, you have a North Dakota Human Rights Act and also a Housing Discrimination Act. So those laws are out there. I'll play another tune here with Carol. This is a tune that Rosie partially wrote. It's called A Rose for Two. And I'll talk a little bit before we get done about ways that you can get involved and to be helpful. Okay, so this is called A Rose for Two. And because we're getting a little later in the program, I won't do any improvisations over it. We'll just play it for you. I'll start playing it by myself so you can hear kind of clearly what the melody is, and then Carol will join in and we'll play the piece for you. This one's in 5/4 time for anyone who's counting. Okay, 1, 2. So I'm lucky that I both get to do music and social justice law, and there are a lot of people that are pretty depressed right now with the state of the world and state of what's going on here, and I'm kind of lucky because I'm actually part of the resistance. I mean, I'm one of the lawyers that does stuff that gets into the court system and maybe stops some of the bad things that are happening. And that gives me a nice sense of purpose, and as you were saying, a nice adrenaline rush. Um, and so I get asked a lot by people that are pretty bummed out. It's like, well, what do? I feel helpless. And what I say to them is pick an organization, pick a cause that you like, pick a class of people that are being hurt, and do something for them, do something for the organizations that support them. There are organizations supporting really every class of people out there. And so find one and volunteer with them, donate some money. When the first Muslim ban happened back in 2017, I think, lawyers were coming to me and saying, you know, what can I do to help? I don't know anything about immigration law. I do mergers and acquisitions or something. And I go, well, can you carry a clipboard? Go, yeah, I can do that. Okay, we're organizing attorneys to go out to the airport, look for someone wearing a hijab, ask if you're waiting for someone, and is that person not getting here? And then if so, take down their information. That information became affidavits that went into lawsuits in the state of Minnesota and the state of Washington that stopped that travel ban. And it was acquired by people that knew nothing about, that felt they had no skills, but they were living and breathing and could do things and could think. And that meant they had skills that they could do. And so, you know, in the area of special needs, there are a number of organizations in North Dakota that are supportive. Besides the governmental organizations, there's the American Civil Liberties Union, Legal Services of North Dakota, that's the legal aid kind of arm of like what I used to do in Minnesota. There's ARC of Bismarck, there's ARC of North Dakota, there's Foundation 139, and there's Ann Carlson organization. So my outline has links to all those. And so, and it doesn't have to be this category. I mean, let's say you decide I'm really crabby about what's happening to immigrants right now. Then find an organization that is supporting them and do what you can. If you can't throw money at them, volunteer to do something. Maybe you're good at doing a database, or maybe you're good at making coffee, whatever. Those are all ways to support. So next tune we're going to do is a tune called Waltz for Christian, and the melody was written by this kid Christian Adzik, and I turned similar to the other ones. The challenge here is that he only gave me 4 notes. And so I decided, after struggling a bit, that if I repeated those 4 notes and flipped them backwards and ran them backwards, I might be able to come up with something, and that's what we have. So this is Waltz for Christian. 1, 2, 3. So consistent with what I just said on the last break, and to not make this sound like a pledge drive, you support this organization, you support this church. So that's another opportunity to volunteer your time or to donate to support this as a cause. So the last piece we're going to do is going to require some audience participation. Okay, so if you look in your program, there's a little thing called Ellie's theme in there. And this originated with this kid, Ellie Gorman, and she was another kid who gave me 4 notes, and after a lot of coaxing, that was all I was going to get. And so I struggled with this one as well until I realized that just by happenstance, that if I took those 4 notes and made a 5-note phrase out of them, it wouldn't be obvious that I was only using 4 notes. So it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay. Now the other nice thing about it is it makes it really easy to sing because there are only 4 notes. Okay. So then my friend Richard Terrell, who wrote the lyrics to Solitude, also wrote the lyrics to this, and it really came out feeling like the best Unitarian hymn. And so we do this at Unitarian services all throughout Minnesota. So Carol and I will play through it once. Even though there's only 4 notes, we'll help you out. We'll give you all those 4 notes a whole bunch of times, and then we'll lead you into singing it. You'll sing a verse. I'll noodle a little bit for a verse, and we'll bring you back in for the last verse. Sound okay? You game? Gonna go for it? Okay. 4. Last verse.
clap for yourselves.
The closing words are from Angeline Jason in The Small Moments. May we remember that trust, like love, grows in small moments, in promises kept and confidences held, in boundaries respected and amends made, in showing up again and again. May we be brave enough to risk trust, patient enough to build it slowly, and gentle with ourselves and others when it breaks.
Put a little love in your heart. Put a little love in your heart. You want the world to know you won't let hatred grow. Put a little love in your heart. I hope when you decide this will be your guide. Put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place. And the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait.